Hello, everybody, and good evening for those of us on the East Coast. Hello, and welcome to a celebration of writing at Gallatin, readings by faculty, students, and alumni. My name is Danielle Hartunian. I go by she, her pronouns, and am the Associate Director of Alumni Relations here at Gallatin. And I'm thrilled, we are all thrilled to welcome you all to our very special event tonight. This is an annual partnership between Gallatin Alumni Relations and the Gallatin Writing Program, and it's one that June and Alice and I look forward to every year. Before we formally begin and get started with today's fabulous readings, I'd like to share a land acknowledgement with all of you. Even though we are online, we are in New York, why am I blanking? New York City, the best city in the world. All right, so we are gathered on the traditional land of the Lenni Lenape peoples. I ask you to join me in the acknowledging of the Lenape community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. We should also acknowledge that the United States and New York City and NYU specifically were founded upon exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples, including those on whose land this institution is located. This acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. I would like to pass the virtual microphone over to June Foley, Senior Director of the Writing Program and Associate Faculty at Gallatin. June.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm June Foley, the first and so far only Senior Director of the Gallatin Writing Program. Toni Morrison was said to have said, if there's a book you want to read, but it hasn't been written yet, you must write it. Similarly, if there's a writing program you want to exist, but it doesn't exist yet, you must create it. Happily, among our readers this evening are several pioneers of the Gallatin Writing Program. Sharon Friedman was one of the writers of the original proposal for the writing program, and she interviewed me for an adjunct job. Lisa Goldfarb was the first writing program chair starting in 2001. And I went to her class to see what it was like to teach at Gallatin. And after the great good fortune of Suzanne Wofford's becoming dean and Lisa's becoming associate dean in 2007, Stacy Pies took up Lisa's torch as chair. All these brilliant, dedicated, and indefatigable founding mothers made possible the dozens of different first-year writing courses and advanced writing courses, the spectacular events such as the conferences on the poets Elizabeth Bishop and Wallace Stevens, the enhancement of the student literary and visual art magazine, the Gallatin Review, Confluence, the Student Forum for Writing, Art, and Research, the Literacy Project, including the Literacy Review, and the annual workshop for teachers of writing to adults, and other beloved civic engagement projects, Great World Text, which Suzanne brought with her, and high school writing mentors, along with events that highlight Gallatin teachers' own writing, such as Writers in Progress and Gallatin Teachers Reading, and collaborations with Alumni Affairs, lately with Danielle. Another extraordinary generation of leaders succeeded them, happily still headed by Suzanne. Associate Dean Millery Pollinay chairs Greg Erickson and Andy Romig, and for the last several years, I have had the immeasurable pleasure of working with and learning from Chair Eugene Vidrin and Associate Director Allison Patey, a Gallatin alum. With thanks to all of them and to Danielle and Allison for making this evening possible, I turn the evening over to Allison.
Hello, thank you, June, and thank you, Danielle. In addition to marking Gallatin's 50th anniversary, this year is historic for the writing program because June Foley, as she said, the first and only director, now senior director, will be retiring at the end of this year. In her history of the writing program, we have to include her brilliant, compassionate leadership over the last 2 decades, which cannot be overstated. So to her, I extend the warmest of thanks. As June mentioned, tonight's faculty readers, Stacy Pies, Daryl Alejandro Holness, Lisa Goldfarb, and Sharon Friedman, have made tremendous contributions to the writing program and the school at large. Many of you in the audience know them as your teachers, advisors, and colleagues. But this evening, we have the special opportunity to learn more about their own interests as they read from their own critical and creative work, as well as from the works that have inspired some of their scholarship and teaching. We'll also be hearing from several alumni this evening, joining us by video from Mexico, California, Japan, and Brooklyn. The novelist and poet Jennifer Clement, the poet Michael Frazier, who will be reading from a lyric essay, children's book author Mary Rose Wood, and poet Nicole Wallace will all be gracing us with their work tonight. So you can see it's a traditionally Gallatin interdisciplinary array. These phenomenal alumni represent Gallatin across the eras, having graduated in years ranging from 1982 to as recently as 2017. They have studied with many of our Gallatin faculty readers, and one, Mary Rose Wood, has herself been a Gallatin teacher. And finally, two tremendously talented Gallatin students, Xiaoshuang Wu and Michael Pagan, will share their writing with us this evening. Both have been closely connected to various aspects of Gallatin's writing program and have nurtured their creative practices in courses as well as outside of the classroom. Each reader is so accomplished that it would take another evening to introduce them by reading their bios. So instead, what we've done is we've created a digital program, the link to which I'll share with you right now in the chat. The program also shows the order that we'll be following tonight, and I encourage you to read along to learn more about all of our tremendous readers. We're thrilled to have them with us tonight, and it is my pleasure to welcome them, starting with our first reader, Professor Stacy Pies.
Hi, good evening. Okay, before I start, I have to give one more acknowledgement to June, because of course she understates herself. I have to tell you that June Foley is the wizard behind the scenes of the writing program. She balances at least 20 plates in the air and never drops one. She once described someone as calling that person a saint and a genius. And that, to quote June Foley about June Foley, she is a saint and a genius. And it's been a privilege and a pleasure to work with her and to know her and to joke with her and to laugh with her and to cry with her and to talk about literature with her. So onward. Okay. I'm going to read five short poems. The first two are by the poet Adrienne Rich, who was a major voice, both of these poems were written between 1968 and 1972, really 1970 to 1972, which is the time when Gallatin was founded. And it was a time of great ferment. Rich was a major voice of second wave feminism. Many of her poems and essays are still read now. And she also wrote about change. And so the first poem is from a collection called The Will to Change. It's from a longer poem called Images for Godard. And I'm going to read the fifth section. Interior monologue of the poet. The notes for the poem are the only poem. The mind collecting, devouring all these destructibles. The unmade studio couch, the air shifting the abalone shells. The mind of the poet is the only poem. The poet is at the movies, dreaming the filmmaker's dream, but differently, free in the dark, as if asleep, free in the dusty beam of the projector. The mind of the poet is changing. The moment of change is the only poem. And the second poem is from the collection Diving into the Wreck, and it's called Living in the Cave. And both of these poems capture sort of the spirit of Gallatin, both at its founding and also in the ways that we hope are still present. Reading the parable of the cave while living in the cave, black moss deadening my footsteps, candles stuck on rock ledges weakening my eyes, These things around me with their daily requirements. Fill me, empty me, talk to me, warm me, let me suck on you. Every one of them has a plan that depends on me. Stalactites want to become stalagmites. Veins of ore imagine their preciousness. Candles see themselves disembodied into gas and taking flight. The bat hangs dreaming of an airy world. None of them, not one, sees me as I see them. The third poem is also about change, but it's about an important part of change, which is loss, and also how loss also gives rise to transformation. I wrote it. It's called My Unconscious. You dwell in a box, space good to hide in. Here, have a pillow. Potato print, scratch board, your art begot of subtraction. You take an imprint. You preserve the perpetually missing. Remember how Barbie always lost one shoe, her sculpted arch unprotected? The tiny pink heel turned up later, buried in carpet pile after the doll had disappeared. Loyal to traces, you cling to betrayal. A father, ill, disappointed, dead in middle age. He has in you a secret life. Love, like salt, sticks to your skin. You don't let anything get away. All the cut corners pile up on the floor. Your snail tracks cover my body. The fourth poem is by Emily Fragos. Emily Fragos is a poet who taught in the Gallatin writing program for over 20 years. Many of you may have had her as a professor. She's an incredibly talented poet. Among her books are Little Savage, Saint Torch, Hostage, and I think it just came out, called Unrest, which is 25 new and 45 collected poems. In this poem, which is one of my favorite poems ever, and which Emily said is probably the only hopeful poem she ever wrote, within loss, oh, this is my cat. Okay, within loss is the possibility for restoration, for a kind of, and for a sort of, for hope and for redemption. The title of the poem is Exit Pursued by a Bear, which is an allusion to a stage direction in Shakespeare's A Winter's Tale. Exit pursued by a bear. The callous henchman is the one devoured, the baby saved. The wind picks up and sends the lazy dove sails flying over the waves without a finger raised. Even the starved mongrel, abandoned by your brother, pries open the ash can with its dirty snout and finds a roasted chicken sitting right on top. Old timers, every limb aching to be straightened, march like pins. The torn angels are being fitted for new gowns by the seamstress with cold lips. Turn, she mumbles, turn, the lovelies. The sun is granting her people a golden day for no earthly reason. And to end, this is a poem. I'd like to read a poem by Theodore Roethke, who doesn't fit our time frame because he lived from 1908 to 1963, but he's inspired many, many modern poets since his publishing in the 60s. And in this poem, this is a poem that I often give to my Gallatin graduates. It's really about going forward and how one moves ahead in an uncertain time. It's called The Waking. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I feel my fate in what I cannot fear. I learn by going where I have to go. We think by feeling, what is there to know? I hear my being dance from ear to ear. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. Of those so close beside me, which are you? God bless the ground. I shall walk softly there and learn by going where I have to go. Light takes the tree, but who can tell us how? The lowly worm climbs up a winding stair. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. Great nature has another thing to do to you and me, so take the lively air and lovely learn by going where to go. This shaking keeps me steady. I should know what falls away is always and is near. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I learn by going where I have to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stacy, for those lovely poems. It is my pleasure to introduce our next reader for the evening, who is an alum, Michael Frazier, who graduated Gallatin in 2017. And as Allison mentioned at the beginning, our alumni are global. And so we had asked them, each of them, to submit a pre-recorded reading. So we're going to share with you now the recording from Michael.
Okay, hello. Happy 50th birthday, Gallatin. My name is Michael Frazier. I graduated in 2017. I'm an educator, poet, editor living in Kanazawa, Japan. And one thing I've learned about writing from Gallatin, it is to read widely, read constantly, and to create constantly, or be in the spirit of creation. And so output and input, they go together, they complement one another. And so the scholar-artist model is one that I carry with me today as a working poet. And so I'm going to read an excerpt of a lyric essay that I wrote or started writing for Gallatin today. And it will be republished in Tokyo Poetry Journal early this year. Okay, so I'm going to read. My mother says, don't come back to America because you're safer in Japan. You'd miss me too much if I stayed here, I say. Who said I was going to stay in America? She laughs. I'm saving up for my ticket now. I'm choosing grandma's nursing home. I'm shipping your brother all his junk. And we both laugh. Earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, typhoons, torrential rain inducing mudslides, roof caving snowfall, murder hornets. My fears are different here. Even if nature does kill me, I'm collateral damage, not the pinpoint of its ire. Here, I will never be called out my name because the language is not built for that type of violence. Only the moon or mosquitoes follow me at night, and even if I'm stopped by the police, they don't have the means to gun me into a headline. I can walk in and out of a convenience store with a hood on, with my hands in my pocket, and still be thanked for coming. The hydrangeas are green and not yet a spectacle. I trace the Japanese characters sa, make, and ka, home, the characters for author. I read aloud Alpha Michael Weaver's theme for intermediate Chinese. In my kitchen, I cut the watermelon flesh into neat small squares and squint at the sun as it's lowered into the ground. My mother calls 13 hours into her future to ask me what's going on in Rochester. She stopped keeping up with the news somewhere between Breonna Taylor spread onto a billboard and Daniel Prude snuffed out around the corner from her hairdresser. I tell her what they're saying about the mayor, where the protests are being held, what neighborhoods to avoid. Before entering the classroom, I spray each of my students' palms with a hand sanitizer spray bottle, the type you'd use to clean windows. I point the nozzle at two boys and they stop, raise their hands and shout, "Don't shoot!" I forget to laugh. Later, my principal asks, with everything going on in America, how are you doing? And I say, I'm here. Negro author asked to leave Japan by police. I'm reading Hughes's autobiography along the Yasuno River. I'm underlining the sentence I, a colored man, had lately been all around the world, but only in Japan, a colored country, had I been subjected to police interrogation and told to go home and not return again. We agree that she shouldn't have called the police when she returned home and saw the door ajar. But what else was I supposed to do? My mother asked. I'm a woman. Everyone knows I live alone. Who was I supposed to turn to? Both of us aware of what could have happened if an officer confused her for what he was looking for. No, I don't have any weapons, I tell the police officers in Japanese. Yes, I live here. Yes, I have a job. No, I don't have any drugs. Here is my citizen card. As I bite my tongue, I think, would you like my blood? Mom, what is safety? Is it a country? Does it live inside four walls? Is it a feeling? Is it a song I can fall asleep to? Is it in my body? Can it be taken without my permission?
Many thanks to Michael. And I believe the journal he mentioned, Tokyo Poetry Journal, in which that full piece has been published, is now out. So feel free to check it out and read the rest. It is now my distinct pleasure to welcome current Gallatin senior Xiao Shuang Wu.
Hi, everyone. I'm very grateful and glad to be here tonight. I'm gonna read the opening of a short fiction I wrote. Reasons to ride an elephant. Reason 1, you're an 11-year-old girl. Riding a gentle giant that slow dances in the jungle stirs up a puff of romance when you are traveling in Thailand. That statement is especially true when you grow up watching Disney princesses who can talk to animals. Pocahontas with her raccoon, Jasmine with her tiger, Cinderella with her little mice. You believe that animals are like us. They have languages, families, emotions. You even believe that animals are born equal, like us, except farm animals are born to be slaughtered and there is nothing you can do, because you can only go vegetarian if you become a monk, or at least that's what your parents tell you. You believe that you can only get closer with the wildlife when you climb on their backs and wander around together. And by together, you mean you sit there doing nothing while the four-legged carry your weight. The world keeps telling you that you are one of a kind, so that you secretly believe you are. You might be the one who can build an instant connection with a strange elephant when you are not the prettiest or the smartest girl at school. The rumbling, the trumpeting, and the swaying of an elephant's tail, which looks exactly like the tail on your Eeyore, might make sense to you. Your parents might not be king or queen, but you might be a princess, like Ro from Barbie as the island princess, who does not know her royal identity either and has an elephant friend. When you are led to the platform to step on the saddle, you are shocked. You see rows of shackled elephants swaying their trunks anxiously. You want to run away. You want to erase yourself for wanting an elephant ride and this nightmarish scene. But it's too late. Your mother has planned the entire day ahead of you. Your father has worked overtime to afford this Thai retreat. There's no face-to-face bonding time with your elephant. It's a ride less than an hour, and you step on the seat without looking into its eyes. The chestnut brown eyes with thick bush-like lashes, you imagine. You are being delusional. You notice the iron chains around your elephant's neck and the right foot, but you figure it acts like a dog leash or a horse harness. Only in the case of an elephant, the harness happens to be an iron chain. After all, it is the biggest mammal on land. Then you lift your legs to avoid the branches as your elephant marches forward, following an army of working elephants ahead. You notice that your parents, who are on the elephant before you, do not need to laboriously dodge the lower branches. Your elephant is much smaller. You lean to the right to peek at its long rubbery nose, realizing that it does not have its tusks grown on yet. What a young elephant. You notice a miniature sickle the local trainer kept next to its fanning ears. There is a stick too. You turn a blind eye. You use your childish innocence to justify your ignorance. 人之初，性本善. You manage to recite the whole three-character classic to impress your parents. The first line of this Confucian text stuck in your brain. Men at their birth are naturally good. The trainer can never do anything to hurt the elephant, can he? The trainer is a man in his 40s from Chiang Mai. He might be younger than he looks because of all the sun he gets from riding elephants as his job. He has a face that you forget the second you move your eyes away from him, a face you don't bother to recall. Such an average guy. He must not be capable of doing anything close to hurting an animal sacred to his culture, right? His scolding of the elephant scares you sometimes. But what do you know? You're a kid. You're a foreigner. You do not speak or understand Thai. Maybe the elephant park matches a younger elephant with you on purpose because you're young too. Your mom later deducts that her elephant must be older because hers has long white tusks. Maybe the job gets easier when the elephants grow older. And thank you.
Thank you, Xiaosheng. It is now my distinct honor to welcome to the Zoom screen our next reader, Gallatin faculty member, Daryl Alejandro Holness.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, June. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, everyone. It's a real honor to be a part of this program. I am so excited to share with everyone poems from my new book, Stepmotherland, that just made its debut last month. And I dedicate this first poem to the mothers of the Gallatin program, as June identified them. I wrote this poem after seeing an image of Rihanna holding a baby. This is before she was pregnant. And it reminded me a lot of Madonna and Child, those portraits from the Renaissance. It also reminded me a lot of my own mother. So I wrote this poem and I dedicated it to my mother, but today's reading of it, I dedicate to the mothers of the Gallatin program. And of course, it is apropos as this is International Women's Day. So happy International Women's Day to anyone who identifies as a woman. Rihanna and Child. The rude girl is with Child in the Instagram pic. It's not her baby. She wears a costume that conservatives may describe as exotic and revealing. I call her mi pana and mi pai. The baby pulls sequins off her bustier, but she's not afraid she won't shine. I was raised by her kind. She shows us how to celebrate Carnival as a hashtag bad girl goddess, tantalizingly hashtag wifey material, playing a benevolent stepmother with hashtag MILF appeal, taking a break from dancing to hush a child in her auntie's laundry room. Over 500,000 followers like this portrait of Rihanna as the Black Madonna. In it, her voluminous hair is a halo. Her shiny headdress is a crown. A beaded curtain frames her as a domestic deity with a washing machine for a throne. Her breast sits ready to be clutched for comfort by the bawling majesty in her arms. Over 500,000 followers hail woman for nestling babe against her bejeweled bustier. Millions more were raised by her kind. Millions more once nestled on the chest of a mother's uniform or in the costume of an auntie close enough to be a stepmom, taking care of others on break from dancing soca or murga in the parade. I was raised by her kind, dazzling and Amazonian, running so fast through the hairspray that her wig almost bursts into flames. She who fills beach dunes with matches, feathers, rhythms, and milk bottles. Her nude arms waving at parade people walking by. Her ribs cracking where the DJ drops the beat. She is not afraid to die. Yes, I was raised by women like that. I was raised by her kind. There's some echoes of Anne Sexton in that poem as well. So shout out to Anne Sexton. This next poem I'm going to read is dedicated to my grandmother. And when I was 19, she taught me how to make bread pudding. And I remember asking her for the recipe, and she said, what am I going to give you the recipe for? I just taught you how to make it. And I was like, I want to remember it. And she said, well, if you need to write it down to remember it, write it down yourself. And so I ran upstairs and I started to write down the recipe, and this poem came out. It's the oldest poem in my book, and it's one that I deeply cherish. Bread pudding grandmama. We crack open the coconut and mix the fluids of el coco with cow's milk, like I mixed words with grunts and moos when speaking with my childhood fable friends. My grandmother teaches me her recipe for bread pudding when I come home heartbroken from high school. Together, we bake everyday pains into guilty pleasures. We mix torn apart bread loaf backs into the batter, always mixed in a ceramic bowl, and watch them move like tectonic plates. I turn the earth at force with my spoon, like turning through stages of teenage rebellion where nothing stands firm beneath my feet and my mind. Like bread is an uneven sponge. I add in brown sugar to taste, she says, and eat some as we bake to feel better about being called a brownie today in class. A little glucose for her day of tasting tears that run down her cheeks as old age runs with my grandfather's mind. We add white sugar, then vanilla, no almond extract unless her monthly check has come in time. If it hasn't, our palate will taste a richer sweetness, the soulful truth of Caribbean cuisine. Almond absence brings the vanilla out more. Our hands mush together our pains with a few grains of salt. For style, she says, with a few slices of butter, the secret to life, in each mixing bowl. I'm the darling grandchild, her favorite, I believe. At school, there is trouble, and medication for her is expensive. So we make bread, bake bread, the sweet kind to satisfy our appetite. She digs from the bottom of a jar for fruits soaked in wine, only the best ones. We add this last. This is what gives it that taste, man. Any liquor is all right. She talks, I smile. 86 years old, I believe her old hands and weak eyes, but strong legs and big smile. We empty it into the pan, bake it, and trade our worries for the aroma. We breathe in the perfume of hard work on a hot afternoon. Forget that children can be mean, and that with wisdom comes age, but with age comes ailment. Bake for 1.5 hours and devour. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daryl. And many congratulations to you on Stepmotherland. I will link for everyone again the program so you can read more about all of our readers and their publications. And I will now introduce the video contribution from our distinguished alumna, Jennifer Clement.
I am Jennifer Clement, and it is a true joy to celebrate Gallatin's 50th anniversary. Gallatin contained my rebellious and individualistic passions and even honored them. That freedom allowed me to become an artist, and in fact, my very first poem was published in the Gallatin Review. Today, I will read a poem on NYU's natatorium, where I swam as a student and decades later as an alumna. The natatorium at NYU. Here, in this pool, I swam back and forth through all seasons. And today, decades later,
I come back, ease in, and I do step in the same water twice. I look for my young self, for the liquid print left at the bottom of the pool, and find her there to say, swim with me. You did not know I would be this, and I did not know my old body would swim inside my new body, so full of thirst and forgiveness. Thank you.
Thank you to Jennifer for that wonderful contribution. It's my honor to now introduce Gallatin faculty member Lisa Goldfarb.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Thank you, June and Allison. You both inspire me. And thank you, fellow readers. It's just a joy to listen to all of you. I think, Allison, that you were in my first class on Wallace Stevens, a poet who I've spent a lot of time studying. This evening, I'm going to read from a personal essay that I wrote called Walking with Stevens, because Stevens used to take very long walks from downtown Manhattan up to Yonkers. He'd take the ferry across the Hudson River and he'd walk along the Palisades. So one day I took a walk all the way up, not all the way to Yonkers, but all the way up through Central Park. And then my husband and I took a car and we drove to the Palisades and walked in the same area that Stevens used to walk in the early 1900s. So this is from the essay. I have often surveyed the view of the Hudson and the Palisades waiting for my train, and have captured the beauty of the scene in iPhone photos in every season. The rich greenery and curling waves in summer, the yellows, reds, and rusts of autumn leaves reflected in choppy water in fall, the blinding white of snow-covered cliffs and the huge chunks of ice on the frozen river in winter, the lime-colored hints of green on the trees and glistening water in spring. But it was not until the winter of 2019, when George and I made a pilgrimage to the Palisades to walk along Stevens's route, that I physically experienced the woods, cliffs, and views that so captured the poet's imagination over 100 years ago. Having pictured Stevens's jaunts through the Palisades in the early 1900s so many times, it was the differences from the natural landscape that struck me most as we approached the preserve. After parking the car, we searched for the path that would lead us through the woods and along the cliffs, while Stevens simply cut into the Alpine Road to find woodland with scarcely a human mark upon it. To locate the path at all, we walked past several grand buildings close to the cliffs: St. Michael's Villa and the Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace Retreat House and Shalom Center. After fumbling our way in circles, we finally met with a sign that indicated the nature walks in the park and the number of miles to each destination. Greenberg Sanctuary, 2.7 miles. Hyler's Landing Trail, 3.5 miles. Gloucester Dock Trail, 5.2 miles. Park Headquarters, 5.6 miles. Unlike Stevens's discovery of a solitude, the human presence on the wooded path in 2019 is everywhere apparent. The highway that runs just to the west of the park provides a constant humming of cars and trucks. Benches dot the winding footpath for the weary walker to rest. And here and there, I would find evidence that others had trod the same path many times before. A badly broken umbrella wedged into a crevice, a Coke bottle or bear can under a tree. From time to time, we would see a runner trying to make his way along the same route, and once another couple out for a similar stroll. We exchanged friendly greetings with the pair, and one of them asked why I was taking notes as I walked. Surely, I thought, as we edged deeper into the path and woods, I would encounter only a vestige of Stevens's untouched landscape, if that, on our walk. This February 3rd of 2019 was an unusual day, or should I say, in this time of climate change, perhaps not so unusual as all that. Earlier in the week, it had been so cold in New York, with temperatures in the single digits all day, that I dared not leave my house. Rain and ice storms had taken down whole trees in my neighborhood, and branches lay strewn about in the streets. By Thursday, the day of our walk through the Palisades, temperatures reached the mid-60s, and it felt like it might have reached 70 degrees in the afternoon. The sky was blue, and the sun was so strong that I wore my jacket only part of the way, even along the shadier portions of the path. While the sun and warmth were yet another reminder of our human impact on the landscape, the unseasonable weather also seemed to transport me to another time and place entirely, outside of the calendar year, and enabled me to imagine what Stevens's walks might have been like so long ago. And the farther we walked, the more it seemed that I could retrace his steps. The footpath bore scars of recent storms, so that I could not walk at a steady pace. I had to tread very carefully and slowly through the mud and avoid the patches of ice, so that I became more sharply aware of my surroundings. As we traveled closer to the woods near the rocks and cliffs, the sounds of the highway faded, and I heard the high-pitched tones of the many nuthatches flying from tree to tree, and even spotted a red-tailed hawk on one tall branch. While the trees were bare, the abundant evergreens provided visual relief from the bald woods. The maple and oak leaves on the ground cracked underfoot, and small inlets overflowing with water from the recent rain and melting snow made a melodious music. It seemed as though I could hear an echo of that tinkling bit of water dripping down from those same huge rocks and black crevices of which the poet wrote. At one point, we found a dilapidated stone well in the woods, and I couldn't help but wonder how long after Stevens's visits to the area it might have been built. The sounds of a woodpecker drumming against a tree interrupted my thoughts, and the sudden rush of water alerted us to a waterfall. We followed the sounds of the water until we found ourselves standing at the edge of one of the cliffs. I was mesmerized by the force of the sounds, the sight of the pounding water, and the sublime view of the Hudson River. No wonder Stevens would stretch himself on one of those boulders as if to merge with the sky, woods, and river. But the view for me was not the culminating moment of our day-long journey. As we neared the end of our walk, we caught sight of 3 sleek deer in the woods. The largest of them stood directly before me, and we looked straight into each other's eyes. She then stamped her foot as if to reclaim the ground on which she stood. George and I were quiet on the car ride home, tired from our long walk, each of us reviewing the sights and sounds of the day, especially that last image of the woodland deer. The world that we explored along the Palisades certainly differed from the one that enchanted Stevens, yet his reflections on its breathtaking natural power still resonate. And this is Stevens. One word more, I thought on the train, how utterly we have forsaken the earth, in the sense of excluding it from our thoughts. There are but few who consider its physical hugeness, its rough enormity. It is still a disparate monstrosity, full of solitudes and barrens and wilds. It still dwarfs and terrifies and crushes. The rivers still roar, the mountains still crash, the winds still shatter. Man is an affair of cities. His gardens and orchards and fields are mere scrapings. Somehow, however, he has managed to shut out the face of the giant from his windows, but the giant is there, nevertheless. 115 years later, I cannot find more perfect words to express the very same feeling I had that night. The giant more real for our Walking the Palisades with Wallace Stevens. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for that brilliant account of tracing Stephen's footsteps. Indeed, I was in your class, and it influenced the way I read poetry, all poetry, forever. And in fact, Danielle says that Wallace Stevens is the reason she became an English major. So we have that connection there as well. We'll now hear from Gallatin alumna Mary Rose Wood, who will be reading from one of her books.
Hi, I'm Mary Rose Wood, and I want to share something I learned about writing at Gallatin, and it is this: writing is thinking. And I was taught that by my advisor and professor, Sharon Friedman. Thank you, Sharon. I'd like to read to you a little bit from my book, Alice's Farm, A Rabbit's Tale. I'm going to read a little excerpt from a scene in which our human protagonist, Carl Harvey, who's a boy from Brooklyn whose family has idealistically decided to buy a farm in the Hudson Valley and learn how to farm it, leaves his house in the middle of the night and stumbles upon a group of local animals, including an American bald eagle named John Glenn, who are, unbeknownst to the Harveys, trying to help them succeed as farmers. Much to Carl's surprise, his dog and his baby sister Marie are also there. Foxy's tail waggled with pride. "I told you he was clever," she said. Carl turned to his sister. "Marie," he said, his voice shaky, "do you understand what's going on here?" "Savident," she burbled. "It's self-evident to everyone but him," Doggo scoffed. Thistle leaned close to Alice and whispered, "Do you suppose the boy farmer will figure it out?" "I don't know," Alice whispered back. "But if he does, maybe he'll be able to help with the pea vine stakes. Look what a giant he is." "Okay," Carl said softly. "Maybe I'm crazy, but I think you rabbits planted this garden, and now you're taking care of it. I think the fox stands guard while you work. I saw how he jumped up to protect you when the eagle arrived. I'm not sure what John Glenn is doing here." He turned to the bird. "But it's not the first time you've come, so it's probably not an accident. Foxy, I bet you know everything, you dumb dog. If only you could talk." Foxy whimpered and nuzzled the boy's hand. The other animals held still, quiet and expectant. Carl felt like he was dreaming, but he also felt suddenly spacious inside, like a parachute near his heart had bloomed wide open and was longing to rise. "Don't worry," he said. "I'm not going to tell anybody what you're doing. They're already suspicious, at least Farmer Janice is. I think I can keep her from finding out the truth. But it means I'm going to have to come down here every day and pretend to do stuff in the garden. Don't be scared of me, okay? I promise I won't mess it up." The animals gazed at him calmly, as if they understood. On impulse, Carl dropped to the ground, to his knees. He held his hand out to the rabbits. The smaller one shrank back, but the larger one hopped once, twice, 3 times. She touched her tiny nose to the boy's fingertips. Foxy woofed quietly to Marie. "Alice," Marie said clearly. "Alice Bun Bun." "Alice? Is that your name, little farmer?" he said. The rabbit looked up at him, her white tail wriggling. "Okay, Farmer Alice. I'll do my best to help you. But you're in charge."
And we will move next to our final faculty reader of the night, Professor Sharon Friedman.
Hello. I'm so happy to be with you all, and quite frankly, humbled and in awe of all of the writing that we've heard tonight. So here is my small part. And also thank you to June. We're sharing a retirement year together. And to Allison and Jen and Danielle, thank you very much for organizing all of this. I am reading a very brief excerpt from my essay on playwright Naomi Wallace that I've drawn from my project on the theater of war that seems to have no end, the wars and the writing about wars. Contemporary drama about the wages of armed conflict has emerged in a range of genres: anti-war adaptations of classical texts, surrealistic theater that conflates disparate war zones in the haunted memories of victims and perpetrators, and inventive approaches to docudrama that transform interviews, journalistic accounts, court transcripts, and personal stories into dramatic texts. Naomi Wallace's transnational theater has garnered attention for her ability to cross borders, geographic, temporal, spatial, and to render embodied dialogues between characters in danger zones. Scott Cummings interprets her plays as a combination of political critique with poetic humanism that, in Wallace's own words, creates a theater in which structures of power suddenly become visible and change becomes possible. Her plays, many historically based, are the culmination of research, travel, interviews, and a kind of reworking of history to imagine the subjectivities and corporeal sensibilities of the dispossessed. Furthermore, they ask audiences to enter into these imagined spaces, alert to the ways in which our government's already involved and we have become silent accomplices. George Potter, another critic, is more specific. We see beyond the abstract frame to a more direct understanding of the inability to feed or educate one's children, the inability to bring a glass of water to an ailing parent, the inability to walk down the road beside one's love, the inability at times to love. Wallace's short, spare, three-character surrealistic drama, No Such Cold Thing, is set in the autumn of 2001 at the edge of a possible desert near Kabul, in which the characters, two young Afghan sisters, 13 and 15, and a Chicano soldier in his 20s, speak to us from the grave, though we do not realize this when we first meet them. Originally commissioned by the Tricycle Theatre in London for its epic production, The Great Game, Afghanistan, a cycle of 12 plays in 3 parts over 3 evenings that traces the history of imperial foreign policy in this region that has shaped the current crisis, viewed from the historical moment of 2009-2010. Within this tribunal production, jam-packed with references to regimes, border mappings, strategic ploys, and heated dialogue between actual historical figures, Wallace's dreamlike interlude hovers over the cycle of devastation. In the wake of what journalist Fintan O'Toole calls the ignominious and deadly evacuation from the longest war in US history, I return to Wallace's play and am haunted as much by what it augurs for the future as what it says about the past. Clearly, it is intended as a powerful reminder of lives lost, but at the same time, an exhortation to imagine those lives in full bloom, the myriad ways in which those lives are interconnected with our own as we hurl into the future, inert witnesses to the next debacle if we do not pay attention. I am haunted by these ghost sisters and their young assailant as they converse across mortal boundaries in ways they could not in life. Ultimately, they express their horrific discovery that they are indeed dead, their desires and hopes, memories, and even dread gone in a moment. The scene opens up at night, lights up on an almost empty stage desert. All we see are 2 sandbags, one slightly smaller than the other, lying upstage some distance apart. These material objects gradually become terrifying signifiers of the sisters, one smaller than the other. As they enter, we do not know that they have been killed, nor do they. Their dialogue incorporates lines from Mina's favorite Pakistani Urdu poet, Faz Ahmed Faz, whom ironically she hopes to study in England. Faz's verse, revolutionary in form and subject, is laced throughout the play, offering a lyrical expression of their faith, quest for beauty, and love of country in the presence of oppression and violence. Woven through this dialogue of hope and fear is the young sister's expression of desire, sensuous and sensual. Cummings observes that power in Wallace's plays is manifest in the corporeal experience, graphic in its violence or its sexuality, and almost obscene intimacy at the moment that this exercise of power is played out or resisted through the human body. Mina, recognizing that she has been wounded, says, "Where in my body do you think he shot me?" "In my neck." Sergio, the young soldier, still refusing this reality, says that he did not shoot her, though as they begin to recall the confrontation between his combat troop and the sister's family, they remember they are dead. Sergio, you dropped so fast. Your hair lay across my arm, black, echoing the lines of Faz's poem recited by the sisters earlier in the play. Alia tells Sergio that he too is dead, hitting a landmine, flying up in the air, high, and your boots fly off your feet, one with a foot still attached. Her uncle had hidden the boots in the well in which Alia has fallen as she breaks loose from her sister's hand. And we realize that she has been wearing his boots in death. The three are continually intertwined. Of course, there is no clear resolution in this non-linear, surrealistic, boundary-breaking foray between the real and the imagined that does not purport to represent the overwhelming nature of trauma. Rather, it offers a fractured, estranging dialogue that in a Brechtian sense asks us to envision alternatives to a seemingly ineluctable historical cycle. I take my cue from Wallace's equally haunting title, No Such Cold Thing, from the poem The Flower by 17th century metaphysical poet George Herbert. To quote the stanza, how fresh, O Lord, how sweet and clean art thy returns. Even as the flowers in spring, the late past frosts, tributes of pleasure bring. Grief melts away like snow in May, as if there were no such cold thing. The as if is a crucial ellipsis that the title points to, because it signifies in this temporal cycle of killing and quickening, the need to forget the cold thing, the grief that melts away in spring, to have faith in the future as the sisters do for a moment. However, the memory of harsh reality returns with a vengeance. The poetic allusion in Wallace's title gestures to the bloom that has been snuffed out, yes, but also to the deep need to deny, to forget, or envision another outcome, perhaps to imagine as if. However, I also see it as a warning that gazing toward a future of regeneration is illusory if we do not intervene in the cycle, not of God's making, but our own. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon, for that deeply thoughtful and feeling reading. It is my honor to introduce and welcome to the Zoom screen our final reader for this evening, Gallatin student Michael Pagan.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here with these amazing writers to celebrate writing at Gallatin. Thank you to Allison and June for the invitation. I'll be doing a reading that has a lot to do with seeing. As of late, I've been obsessed with what it means to see. I'm a street photographer. And so this is called Cities and Seeing. Now, I shall tell you of a city that directs seeing, that takes away seeing, that covers seeing, leaving you in the loneliness of obscured vision. It's a city of constant throughs. As a passenger on the M15 bus going through East Harlem, southbound through Midtown to Whitehall Street, you'll find it unpleasant to see people along the streets through stained windows. You'll find it hateful to see community parks through a pier, through metal fences. Immersed in the interior of a dimly lit bus, you won't fail to see the stray cats in garbage heaps across and along avenue after avenue. You'll find it nerve-wracking to be confronted by the traffic through the frame of the front windshield. After a while, your throughs become narrowed. After a while, your throughs create distance After a while, these throughs gain power and displace, and you'll be forever bus-ridden. These throughs embed confusion in seeing that forever fractures you. After a while, the only thing that's ever in focus is the stained windows, the metal fences, the New York City traffic, the Harlem stray kitties, and the Midtown garbage heaps. After a while, the world on the other side of these obscurities vanishes. Thank you.
Michael, thank you so much. Thank you for enabling us all to see through cities and seeing. Thank you to all readers and writers for making the unconscious conscious. Stacy, Michael Frazier, my former advisee, Zhao Shuang, Literacy Review, 20 editor, 19 editor. Is it 20? Yes, 20 editor. Daryl, Jennifer, Lisa, Mary Rose, Nicole, Sharon, and Michael Pagan. Thank you for this dazzling celebration of writing at Gallatin.
Thank you, June. I also just want to echo and add on to the thanks to our Gallatin colleagues, to the events team, Rachel Plutzer, Teresa Anderson, Kat Feliciano, and Kiana Zambrano, as well as our theater team, Jen Burge, who's behind the scenes and made this wonderful event flow so smoothly with all the various transitions, and Tracy Clapper. It really takes a village to make our Gallatin events happen. So we just wanted to give everybody a heartfelt thanks. And Allison?
And finally, we just want to thank all of you, our audience, for joining us tonight on Zoom for what is the first of several events celebrating Gallatin's 50th. I'll just put one more link in the chat to the events calendar where you can see some of the robust programming coming up. And again, thank you all for joining us for this very, very special evening, and good night.